3:30 in the afternoon, July 17th, 1981. Stacy Arras, 14 years old, stepped out of her tent at Sunrise Camp in Yosemite with an Olympus camera hanging around her neck. She wanted to go down to the lake below to take a few photos. From that moment on, no one knows what happened to Stacy Ann Arras. A young girl vanished in broad daylight, just 50 meters from the guide, in less than 10 minutes. How could that happen, and why, after 44 years, does the US government still refuse to release the files? Stacy was born on September 29, 1966 in Saratoga, California, a quiet small town nestled among grassy hills about an hour's drive from San Francisco. The summer she turned 14, there was nothing special about her shoulder-length blonde hair, usually tied in a ponytail, blue eyes, about 5'5", thin like most girls her age. Her classmates said she was cheerful, approachable, a bit shy, but not withdrawn. Teachers said she was well-behaved, obedient, caused no trouble. Neighbors remembered her as a polite child who always greeted adults. No one called her the adventurous type or someone who liked doing dangerous things. On the contrary, Stacy was the kind of good daughter any parent would dream of. Obedient, careful, knew fear. That July, she went with her father, George Arras, on a 4-day hiking trip in Yosemite. Their group had 8 people. No one knew each other beforehand, just tourists who signed up for the same tour, hiking during the day, resting at night at camps with ready-made tents and kitchens. Stacy brought her 35mm Olympus camera with a black fabric strap always hanging around her neck. In the early 80s, photography wasn't as simple as now. Each roll of film had only 36 shots. Each shot cost money, so every time she pressed the shutter, she had to think carefully. Is this angle beautiful enough? Is the light okay? She loved photography, not in a professional way, simply loved capturing beautiful moments she saw. That afternoon, after a full day walking through steep and winding trails, the group arrived at Sunrise High Sierra Camp, the final stop at an elevation of nearly 3,000 meters. They dismounted, tied the reins, went into tents to change their sweat-soaked clothes. There was a distinct sense of relief when stepping into the tent from being on the road tents to safely arrived. The camp had tents for shelter, a kitchen, a manager ready to help. Everything would be fine. But Sunrise Camp was located in rather tricky terrain. An elevation of nearly 3,000 meters meant the air contained only 70% oxygen, making every breath deeper, hearts beat faster. Daytime temperatures could reach a pleasant 20 degrees Celsius, but when the sun set behind the western mountain peaks, the temperature dropped very quickly, 10 degrees at dusk, 5 degrees at midnight, near freezing at 3 or 4 in the morning. Around the camp were massive granite boulders, polished smooth by glaciers thousands of years ago, creating beautiful, shiny surfaces, but slippery as ice. Between the boulders were lodgepole pine groves, 5 to 10 meters tall, their dark green canopies overlapping to create an impenetrable curtain. Once you stepped behind the trees, you disappeared from the sight of someone standing just 50 meters behind. Below the camp were the 3 sunrise lakes, clear blue water reflecting the sky and mountain peaks. From above, they looked beautiful as jewels. That was where Stacy wanted to go. She changed clothes in the tent, an ivory white pullover windbreaker with a front zippered pocket and hood. Inside was a white jersey blouse with lace trim around the square neckline, shorts with a distinctive pattern, vertical chestnut, brown and white stripes alternating with small sky blue stripes, gray hiking boots with Vibram soles. Do you want to go down to the lake to take some photos with me, Dad? I'm tired, honey. Go with someone else. Stacy obeyed, sat down, took off her flip-flops, put her feet into the gray leather boots with Vibram soles, tied the laces carefully. An elderly man in the group volunteered to go with her. 3:30 in the afternoon, they left camp. The sky was still bright. The summer sun didn't set until 8 at night. The weather was beautiful. People in the group saw them walking down the slope toward the lake. No one worried. Just a short photo trip. An hour, and they'd be back. They walked a short distance. The path went downhill. The rocks were slippery. The old man started breathing heavily at this altitude. Each breath had only 70% oxygen. He sat down to rest on a boulder by the path. You go ahead a bit more, take a few shots, and come right back. Okay, you rest here. Be careful. Stacy continued on. People at camp, standing above, could still see her in her white jacket. Then she walked behind the pine grove, disappeared from view. The group's guide was working at the horse corral near camp. He happened to look down, saw the girl standing on a boulder about 50 meters south of the trail. White jacket, blonde hair, looking toward the lake. He turned back to work. A few minutes later, when he looked again, she was no longer there. The old man sat on the rock, looking down toward where Stacy had just gone. 10 minutes passed, 15 minutes, 20 minutes. He began to worry. "Stacy!" His voice echoed against the rock face. Silence. "Stacy! Where are you?" Only the sound of wind through pine branches. He stood up, walked in the direction she had just gone, calling her name as he walked. Saw nothing. He walked further, called again. Still no answer. Now he was really worried. He returned to camp, walking quickly, breathing heavily, looking for George Arras. "I can't find her. I've been calling, but there's no answer." George looked at him, then looked down toward the lake. They went down the path immediately, calling Stacy's name, checking both sides of the path, looking into bushes, rock crevices. Saw nothing. They went all the way down to the lakeshore. Called her name. The voice echoed over the water. No answer. The sun began to tilt west. Shadows lengthened. The temperature dropped. They searched until it was nearly dark. The guide said, "We have to go back. It's dark now, not safe." George didn't want to go back, but he knew continuing in darkness on slippery rock terrain was risking lives. They returned to camp. That night, no one could sleep. George sat outside the tent, wrapped in a blanket, looking down into the darkness toward the lake, listening to every sound, hoping to hear a call, a cry, any sign, only the sound of wind. The sound of water flowing in the distance, the sound of small animals in the bushes. The temperature dropped near zero. Stacy was only wearing a thin jacket and shorts. The next morning, news was transmitted down to National Park Service headquarters. The official search began. The morning of July 18th, rescue forces gathered at sunrise. Yosemite Rangers, rescue teams from neighboring counties, volunteers from Mammoth Mountain. By noon, there were over 100 people, divided into many small groups. 8 K9 teams were brought in. Dogs trained thousands of hours to find people by scent. Usually, a search only uses 2 to 3 teams. Mobilizing up to 8 teams showed how seriously the Park Service assessed the situation. Handlers had them smell Stacy's clothes from the tent. They began working. They walked a few meters, then stopped, turned their heads, looking confused. Some sat down as if detecting something. The unusual thing was that not one dog among the 8 teams established a continuous trail longer than 15 meters from that boulder. 3 helicopters took off. The sound of rotors echoed throughout the valley, shaking the air. From 300 meters up, pilots looked down at gray-white granite boulders stretching out dark green tree clusters, 3 sparkling lakes. They flew lower, tilting the aircraft so observers could scan every square meter with binoculars. But something wasn't right. The air today wasn't clear. A thin gray-green fog covered everything, smoke from forest fires tens of kilometers away spreading over. The smoke wasn't thick enough to completely obscure, but enough to blur visibility, reduce contrast. A white jacket on gray rock background in these conditions was nearly invisible from above. And this was 1981. Helicopters had no thermal cameras, no infrared, only human eyes. "We'll find the girl. The area isn't that big," a ranger told George confidently. George nodded, clutching Stacy's photo in his hands. Day 3, they continued, expanded the range to more distant areas. Dogs ran everywhere, noses to the ground, sniffing every bush, every boulder, but they couldn't pick up a clear trail. They stopped sometimes, sniffed hard, ears perked up as if catching something, then lost direction again, turned their heads, looking at handlers with confusion. That afternoon, a volunteer found something in the dry pine needle layer. A small, round, black object. A camera lens cap. George was called over. He picked up the cap, turned it over, looked closely, he nodded. "That's right, that's the type of cap for the Olympus my daughter was carrying." This was the first clue, the only one. After 3 days, with hundreds of people, this was the only thing they found. The camera itself was not found, nor was the camera strap, only the cap. The lens cap lay on the dry pine needle layer, not buried or covered. This suggested it hadn't been there long. If it had gone through rain or strong wind, it could have been swept away or covered by leaves. They used this location as the center point, drawing concentric circles on the map, gradually expanding. They concentrated search forces more carefully. Every square meter was checked. They searched, nothing. They searched more. Still nothing. Day 5, a hypothesis was put forward. Stacy might have fallen into the lake. Professional divers were deployed. They brought diving equipment, powerful waterproof flashlights. One lake at a time, they dove down. First lake. They dove along the shore, swept lights everywhere, stayed down nearly an hour. Surfaced, shook their heads. Found nothing. Second lake, same thing. Nothing. Third lake, same result. When divers made the final report, they confirmed all 3 lakes were clear. No Stacy. One thing that confused experts, 8K9 teams that had found people in hundreds of other cases, completely failed. Search dogs are usually very effective. Their noses are thousands of times more sensitive than humans. But here, they lost direction. I've never seen them this confused, a handler said. They caught something a few times, but then lost it, like the trail was cut off. Into the second week, forces shrank, but continued. About 50 people, 3 dog teams, 1 helicopter. They checked more distant areas. The helicopter had flown over 40 hours, pilots rotated shifts, but the aircraft barely rested. Day 9, professional climbers were deployed to check deep rock crevices. They used ropes, flashlights, slowly descended each crevice. Light beams shone down into the depths. They called Stacy's name, voices echoing underground. Listened. Only the sound of water dripping from somewhere. They checked this crevice. Nothing. Moved to another. Nothing. Day after day. Still nothing. July 28th, 11 days after Stacy vanished, Park Director Robert Benoist called a press conference. "We've done everything possible," he said, voice weary. "Over 100 people, 8 dog teams, 3 helicopters, divers, climbers. We've checked everywhere within a reasonable radius and found nothing except a lens cap. So, what do you think happened?" Benoist was silent for a few seconds, looked down at the table, then looked up, straight at the camera. "We don't know. The girl seems to have vanished." Search cost, $50,000, an enormous sum in 1981. George sat in the press room, listening to every word. When Benoist said concluded, he closed his eyes, took a deep breath, then stood up and left without saying anything. George didn't accept it. He printed 1,000 flyers with Stacy's photo, her smiling brightly, hair in a ponytail. Sent them throughout California, Nevada, Oregon, Arizona, called every police station, week after week, month after month. No one saw her, no reports, no clues. The lead investigator, a senior ranger named Michael Chen, opened the case file on his desk. In it were hand-drawn diagrams of the area, photos taken from helicopters, topographic maps with red circles marking searched areas, and a list of the 8 people in the group. "I want to talk to each person individually," Chen told his team. "Each person, separately. Don't let them hear what others say." They started with the old man, the last person with Stacy. His name was Robert Morrison, 77 years old, a retired math teacher from Oakland. He was traveling alone on this tour. His wife died 2 years ago. His children had their own families. Chen watched him sit across, hands trembling, eyes red from lack of sleep. "Mr. Morrison, I need you to tell me from the beginning. Every detail, even the smallest." And he told. They left camp at 3:30. Walked about 300 meters. He wasn't exactly sure. Then he started having trouble breathing, heart racing, legs heavy as lead. He sat down to rest on a boulder by the path, told Stacy to go ahead, take a few shots, and come back. "How far did you see her go?" She continued down the path. "I saw her go. Maybe another 50 meters. Then she turned right a bit, probably to find a better view. Then she went behind some pine trees. I didn't see her after that." "How long were you sitting there?" "About maybe 15 minutes. I thought she was taking photos, but after 20 minutes, I started worrying. I called her name. No answer. I stood up, walked in the direction she had just gone, called her name continuously. but nothing. Chen took notes. During the time you were sitting there, did you hear anything unusual? A scream? A call for help? Animal sounds? Anything? Morrison shook his head. No. Just the sound of wind through trees, the sound of water flowing from the lake below, nothing else. No sound of people talking, footsteps, branches breaking? No, nothing at all. Chen looked at him silently for a few seconds. Mr. Morrison, I have to ask this. Are you sure you sat still there for 20 minutes? Did you leave that spot, even for a moment? Morrison looked at Chen, eyes wide. Are you asking if I did something to the girl? I'm just trying to verify every detail, sir. I sat still there. I'm old. I was tired. I sat there and waited for her to come back. That's the truth. Chen nodded. He believed Morrison, looking into his eyes, seeing the guilt, the real pain of someone blaming themselves for letting the girl go alone. But Chen still had to ask. In every case, the last person to see the victim is always the first suspect. Next was the guide, Daniel Parker, 32 years old, worked for the tour company for 5 years. He sat down, looking exhausted. Mr. Parker, you said you saw Stacy standing on a boulder. When was that? Around 4 in the afternoon. Maybe 4:10. I was checking the horses. One seemed to be limping a bit. I was checking its hoof. I straightened up, looked around, happened to look down below, saw the girl. Are you sure it was Stacy? White jacket, blonde hair. Who else? The group only had one girl that age. What was she doing? Standing on a boulder, looking toward the lake, holding the camera. I saw her raise it up, probably focusing. How far away was she from you? Parker thought. From where I was standing, maybe 100 meters diagonally. She was lower down, about 50 meters south of the main trail. And then I went back to work, lifted the horse's leg up, checked the hoof. Took about 5 minutes. When I looked again, she was no longer there. Did you hear anything during those 5 minutes? Parker shook his head. No. But the horse corral is quite far away, and the horses were eating grass, making noise. If someone screamed, I might not have heard. Chen took notes. Did you see anyone else in that area? Other hikers? Park staff? No, just the girl. Are you certain? Pretty certain, but, there are a lot of trees. If someone was standing behind trees, I wouldn't have seen them. Chen looked up. Was someone standing behind trees? I don't know. I'm just saying it's possible. I didn't see anyone else, but that doesn't mean no one was there. They continued with each person in the group, a married couple from Sacramento. They were in their tent when Stacy vanished, saw nothing. A single man from San Diego was cooking at the communal kitchen, also saw nothing. The remaining 3 to 2 women and 1 man were resting in tents or using the restroom, had no useful information. None of them looked suspicious. None had reason to harm Stacy. But Chen still carefully noted each person, name, age, address, occupation, background. Later, if needed, they would investigate more deeply. After a week of work, Chen sat with the investigation team and summarized. What do we have? A girl vanished during the time period from 4 o'clock to 4:30 in the afternoon. No witnesses saw anything unusual. No screaming, no signs of struggle, just a lens cap. Another investigator asked, is there any possibility the girl left voluntarily, ran away? Chen shook his head. No motive. The girl had no problems with family. No secret boyfriend, no reason to run away, and if she wanted to run away, she would have taken the camera. That was her most precious possession. But the camera vanished with her. So what are we looking at? Accident, animal, or Chen was silent, or foul play? Those are the 3 possibilities. They checked the accident possibility, called a geology expert to survey the area. The expert, a professor from UC Berkeley, walked along the path Stacy had taken, examined every boulder, every crevice. There are many crevices here, he told Chen, some very deep, but most are narrow at the mouth, only a few dozen centimeters wide. To fall in, a person would have to almost intentionally jump down. Normal slipping wouldn't lead to falling into a crevice. So what's the most likely scenario? The professor thought. If it's an accident, I think the girl might have slid down a slope, hit her head on rock, lost consciousness, then rolled down to a hidden place. But if so, There would be traces, blood on rocks, slide marks. You said they found nothing? Nothing. The professor shook his head. Then I don't know. Geologically, it's possible. But there's no evidence. They checked the animal possibility, called a wildlife expert. He, a ranger with 20 years experience, heard the description and also shook his head. Mountain lions don't attack like that. They leave traces. Always. Blood, fur, claws. And they never carry bodies far without leaving a single trace. I've seen dozens of mountain lion attack scenes. Never this clean. Chen nodded. He thought so too. So what's left? Foul play. Chen requested background checks on everyone who could have been in that area that day. Not just the 8 people in the group, but all other guides, park employees, tourists who registered at the park within a week before and after. A long list, over 300 people. They began filtering, checking criminal records. Most were clean. A few people had minor records, drunk driving, minor assault, petty theft. No one had records related to children or serious violence. But one person caught Chen's attention. A 35-year-old man named Thomas Brennan, who had registered at the park one day before Stacy vanished. He said he would hike alone for 3 days. But when Chen checked, he left the park just 1 day after Stacy vanished, 2 days earlier than planned. Chen called Brennan. He lived in Fresno, about a 2-hour drive from Yosemite. Mr. Brennan, I'm investigating the case of a missing girl at Yosemite on July 17th. Records show you were in the park at that time. Brennan's voice sounded cautious. Yes, I went to Yosemite, but I don't know anything about a missing girl. You said you'd be there 3 days, but only stayed 1 day. Why? I wasn't feeling well. Headache. Probably from the altitude. I decided to leave early. Which trails did you take? I don't remember clearly. Many trails. I wandered around. Did you go near Sunrise Camp? A long silence. I don't remember. Chen took notes. Mr. Brennan, I need you to come to the police station. We need an official statement. Do I need a lawyer? You have the right to a lawyer. But if you're not involved, you don't need to worry. Brennan agreed to come. But when the appointment came, he didn't show up. Chen called back. The number couldn't be reached. They went to the address Brennan had given, a small apartment in Fresno. The landlord said Brennan had moved out 2 days before, left no forwarding address. Chen felt something wasn't right. Innocent people don't run. He requested a search warrant for the apartment. But when they arrived, the apartment was empty. Nothing left. No furniture, no trash, no traces. Cleaned thoroughly. Bank check. Brennan closed his account at Bank of America Fresno branch on July 20th, 1981, 3 days after Stacy vanished. Withdrew the entire balance, $2,940 cash. Social Security check. No income tax records for Thomas Brennan after 1981. No W-2, no 1099. No employment records whatsoever. Death certificate check. No death certificate filed for Thomas Brennan. Born March 12th, 1946 in California. A warrant was issued in September 1981, not an arrest warrant, but wanted for questioning. Photo from driver's license was sent to national parks, ranger stations throughout the West. In October 1982, a ranger at Sequoia National Park reported finding an abandoned tent in the backcountry area. Inside was a jacket. In the jacket pocket was a receipt from a Safeway store in Fresno dated July 10th, 1981. Fingerprints were collected from the tent and items sent for analysis. Result, not enough comparison points to confirm. After that, no more reports about Thomas Brennan in the files. No one saw her. No reports, no clues. Many years after Stacy, a man named David Paulides began digging deeper. Paulides wasn't a scientist. He was a former San Jose police officer, California. After retiring, he became interested in a strange phenomenon. Too many people vanishing without a trace in national parks. He collected files. Hundreds of cases, then thousands. He recognized a pattern, strange commonalities between cases. Most occurred near water sources, lakes, streams, waterfalls. Many cases occurred in granite areas. Victims often separated from groups only for brief moments. K-9 teams couldn't find trails. if bodies were found, often in places that had been searched many times before. Polanyi used Stacy's case as one of the den-scene cases in his book. He didn't draw definitive conclusions about what happened, but he asked questions. Why do so many people vanish following the same pattern? And why does the government hide information? Polanyi decided to use FOIA to request release of Stacy's files. He only requested basic information, search reports, witness statements, collected clues. The Park Service responded by releasing a very small portion, a few photos of search teams, some cost documents, some administrative letters, but all actual investigation reports were withheld. So if they really know something, why not say? Perhaps to protect the park's reputation. America's national parks are a massive tourism industry. Millions of people visit each year, spending billions of dollars. If the public knew there was great danger, possibly predators, possibly terrain much more dangerous than advertised, revenue would drop sharply. Staying silent, calling incidents, unfortunate accidents, and hoping people forget, that might be the safer strategy. Or investigators know who did it, but don't have enough evidence. It's possible the person involved is someone in or near the park, staff, guides, other tourists. They have enough suspicion, but not enough evidence to prosecute. Releasing files could lead to false accusations, lawsuits, ruining innocent people's reputations. George Arras passed away in 2001 without knowing what happened to his daughter. Until the last moment, he still hoped someday there would be news. But that news never came. The 77-year-old man, the last person with Stacy, carried guilt until he passed. He told family he shouldn't have let the girl go alone. He should have followed her. If he had followed, perhaps everything would be different. The guide, who saw Stacy last standing on the rock, never forgot that image. The girl in white jacket, blonde hair, looking toward the lake. Then, a few minutes later, she was no longer there. He wondered, if he hadn't turned away, if he had watched her continuously, maybe he would have seen something. Maybe he could have saved her, but he turned away, and now it's too late. If Stacy vanished today instead of 1981, the search would be completely different. Everyone on the team would carry GPS equipment recording every step precisely. The commander would look at digital maps and immediately see gaps not yet checked. Helicopters and drones would have flare thermal cameras, seeing through smoke, darkness, even tree canopies. Human bodies, whether alive or recently deceased for hours, still emit heat different from the environment. Cameras would detect even when human eyes cannot. But 1981 had none of that. Only human eyes, compasses, paper maps, and hope. Perhaps that's why they didn't find Stacy. Not because she wasn't there, but because technology then wasn't sufficient. Or perhaps, even with all modern technology, the result would still be the same. Because there are mysteries technology cannot solve. After researching this case, there are things I can't help but question. The lens cap was there, meaning Stacy was preparing to take photos. But where's the camera? If she fell into a rock crevice, the camera still hanging around her neck would fall with her. If she was attacked by an animal, the camera would be near the scene. So why only the cap? Why did the cap separate from the camera and lie there alone? A question I want to ask investigators: did they thoroughly check the backgrounds of everyone in the group? The 8 people traveling together, who were they? Did they know each other beforehand? Were there any personal grudges? I don't see this information in any public reports. Did they thoroughly question the guide? Why did he only look at Stacy once, then turn away? During those minutes, what was he doing with the horses that kept him too busy to look back? Was anyone else in that area? Other tourists? Other park staff? During the 9 days of official searching, George Arras did not leave the temporary command post set up near Sunrise Camp. He slept in a tent, ate whatever people gave him, and spent every second monitoring search progress. He didn't just stand and watch, he asked, he suggested. He pointed at maps to areas he thought needed more searching. My daughter could have gone farther. My daughter is strong. Expand more. He urged them to search one more day, then another day. Director Benoist told him, "We'll continue until we have a satisfactory answer." But on day 9, they stopped. Not because there was an answer, but because they had run out of places to search, budget to spend, reasons to continue. George stood there, watching people pack equipment, take down the command tent, prepare to leave. He didn't cry, didn't shout, just stood there, holding the map, wrinkled from opening it hundreds of times, looking at the red circles marking searched areas, wondering where his daughter could be outside those circles. A year later, a local reporter wrote, "The Arras family is still haunted by the unanswered question. They cannot continue living normally." How can you when your daughter vanished as if she never existed? George didn't accept that silence. He organized private searches, hired people, went himself. Year after year, every summer, he returned to Yosemite, walked along trails, called his daughter's name into empty forests. He sent letters to senators, representatives, anyone with power, requested they pressure the Park Service to continue investigating. He called the press, retold the story, kept Stacy's name from being forgotten. He became his own investigator, not because he wanted to, but because no one else did the work. He learned to read topographic maps, learned to track, learned to ask questions the right way when interviewing people, but he never found the answer. When he passed in 2001, 20 years after Stacy vanished, in his will, he left money to continue searching if new clues appeared. In his desk drawer, people found hundreds of flyers with Stacy's photo. Some faded with time, some still pristine as if printed yesterday. If I had to choose one theory, I would choose abduction. Not because I want to believe the worst, but because that's the only theory explaining why the government has hidden files for 44 years. If this were just an accident, they would have every reason to go public, prove they did everything, had no fault. If it were an animal attack, they should also go public to warn others about the danger and improve safety measures. But they didn't do that. They stayed silent, and that silence speaks louder than any report. I know this is wild thinking, but try imagining. If Stacy is still alive, she would be 58 now. If abducted at 14 and kept under high control, she might not remember who she really is. There are similar cases. People abducted young, living decades with their abductors, only rescued much later. Elizabeth Smart was abducted at 14, held 9 months. J.C. Dugard was abducted at 11, held 18 years. Both lived not far from where they went missing, but it took years to find them. I'm not saying this is a high probability, but I can't completely rule it out. Somewhere in Yosemite, among granite boulders and towering pines, maybe Stacy is still there. A pair of gray leather boots with Vibram soles, an Olympus camera with black strap, a 14-year-old girl forever walking to the lake she never reached. Or maybe not. Maybe the truth is completely different. There's one more detail I can't stop thinking about. Not about Stacy, but about Yosemite in general. In 1999, 18 years after Stacy vanished, a man named Cary Stayner was arrested for 4 cases of ending lives at Yosemite. Stayner wasn't a stranger wandering through the park. He worked there, doing maintenance at Cedar Lodge, a motel right outside the park gate. He lived there, ate there, knew the terrain like the back of his hand, knew the less traveled trails, knew the hidden places, the deep rock crevices no one checked, and for years, no one suspected him. He was just a regular employee, hard worker, polite with guests, nothing stood out. When arrested, police asked, "Why did you do it?" Stayner answered, "Because I could. Because no one saw. Because in the forest, everything can vanish." I'm not saying Stayner was involved in Stacy's case. He was only 17 in 1981, living with family in Merced, not yet working at Yosemite. But his case proves one thing. A predator can exist in the park ecosystem for years without anyone discovering. That makes me wonder, in 1981, was there anyone working at Yosemite, guides, maintenance staff, cooks, anyone who could be a predator? Someone familiar enough with terrain to know exactly where to hide wrongdoing? Someone smart enough to leave no trace? Did police check backgrounds of all park staff in the Sunrise area that day? Did they consider the possibility the perpetrator wasn't a random tourist but an insider? In public records, I don't see this information. Maybe it's in the sealed portion, maybe they checked and found nothing, or maybe they found something but didn't have enough evidence to act. And that's the scariest thing, the possibility they know but can't prove. But today, 44 years after that afternoon, one thing remains certain. No one knows what happened to Stacy Ann Arras in those final minutes before she vanished. And perhaps No one will ever know. What do you think happened to Stacy? Accident? She fell into a deep rock crevice no one could find? Animal attack, though there are no traces of blood or struggle? Thomas Brennan, the mysterious man who vanished right after Stacy went missing? Or another predator, maybe someone working right in the park, familiar with terrain, knowing exactly how to hide wrongdoing? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. I read them all. And who knows, maybe among you, someone will notice a detail both police and I missed. If you want to see more mysterious cases like this, real stories, thoroughly researched, told truthfully without embellishment, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Every week, I'll bring a new case, a new unanswered question, and if this video made you think, made you curious, or even gave you slight chills, share it with friends. Stories like Stacy's need to be told. People like her shouldn't be forgotten. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video. And remember, if you go hiking, never go alone. And if you must go, always tell someone where you are. Because sometimes the wilderness never returns what it has taken.